Hey, welcome to the video. So, this video is going to be part 2 of building a cabin in Alaska. We're just outside of Two Rivers, Alaska here. And if you want to check out the first video, I'll put a little thing on the screen here for that. And that first video is going over building this pad. We get a little bit in depth into geology and soils of Alaska. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and get our pads poured for our post and pad foundation. We'll get our main beams installed, floor joists up. We're going to get our walls up. And we'll see if we can't just roll right in, getting the roof on this sucker, get it dried in, and get our interior put together. So let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to lay out our building's footprint. Then let's set up some forms and pour some pads. And then the way it works is I've got a layout mark on the string line, and I measure crossways. I get the hypotenuse, and which in this case is, well, hold on for a helicopter. So, where were we? Oh yes. So the way that this all starts is I start off of one point, and this one was it because this is the lowest. At least it looked the lowest. You'll see this mark here. What I do is I start with at a certain height. Really don't matter because you can change it. I put my string line on there and I run it across that one, and that one with this little guy here. This is string level. There's other ways of doing this using a transit and such. Well, I put the string level on there, and then I run over to the other side with the string, lifting it up and down till that bubbles level. And I make a mark on my corner post. And so then that puts a mark that's at the same level on each corner. And I'll come back, and when I put these batten boards on, or whatever you want to call them, I'll start with this one, screw it in here, and then I'll throw my level on, and I'll lift this board up and down until my bubble's level. And then same thing with this one, screw this side, lift that end up and down until she's level. I do that on all four sides. And then I have a nice place. I put this string under, this string over. They're not quite touching, just about perfect. And there you go. So the way my layout is I'll have a pier block here, pier block there, pier block there, pier block there, 4 of them, and then I'll have 2 doubled up 2x12s, and there's going to be 3 of them. I set here, so 1, 2, and 3. I've got to do a layout here. I'll put a stake and a batten. I'll run a string line across, and I'll find my locations. Now once I find those locations, what I'll do is I'll have my form boxes ready, and I'll measure down off the string lines, which will be over each form location, and I'll know how deep I need to dig. So if I need the top of the forms to be about 6 inches below the string line, but I measure down from the string line and it's only 4 inches, I know at that particular form I need to dig down about 2 inches. That way they all end up level. Here you can see that we've done just that, dug out each footprint of each form, ensuring that each and every pad will be at the same level. Alright, so now it's on to mixing some concrete, by hand of course, and we're just using sand, gravel, water, and Portland cement. Mixing concrete using its base ingredients like this, rather than say buying a bag of pre-mixed saccrete, works out to, I want to say, about a third less expensive, depending on your location. And Alaska is not always the best place to compare to for the lower 48, but depending on your location, it's usually cheaper to go ahead and go this route instead of buying saccrete. And of course, where I'm at, a concrete truck wasn't really a very viable option. Now, of course, bringing in my inner perfectionist, I wanted to make these pads all nice and pretty, a nice steeled finish, but you know, the rain comes in and just changes your mind on that. So that's why these little bits of plastic are there. They don't need to be a steeled finish anyways. No one's necessarily going to see them. Now, as we wait on our pads to cure out, we've brought in our main beams. Our main beams are just 2 doubled up 2x12s. Now, these Douglas fir beams, they sit on just your average pier blocks that have an adjustable mount in them. We'll cover those here a bit later. So getting into throwing up our main beams and everything, we're getting ready to put in our floor joist. Now these cross boards that you now see between the beams, these are lagged in there and they'll also be strapped around the beams. These keep the beams from twisting once the house is built on them, and also because our ground shifts so much here in Alaska, it keeps everything rigid and keeps them from deflecting to the left or to the right. Okay, now we can start getting rim boards and floor joists put in. Now, floor joists are 2x10 Douglas fir on 16 centers. Now, I will say that I'm sure a lot of people would have liked to see all the lumber milled off of trees from this land, but unfortunately, as you can kind of see here, we've got mostly some birch and well, there's cottonwood, and we get into a little bit of spruce. It's a great little piece of property, but unfortunately just doesn't have the timber to support the lumber for a build like this. Now, all that being said, it is in my future plans to get a piece of property with timber that is adequate for milling and to build a mill to do that. Anyhow, here's those straps I was talking about that keep the main beams from twisting. Now we're at a point now where we can start putting the decking in. Our subfloor is 1-inch OSB plywood, if you will. Now it's at this point that we come back once we've got our subfloor done, and we go in and we re-level the entire floor. Now, if you're not familiar with Alaska, those adjustable pier blocks come in handy down the road because hopefully this doesn't move too much, but a lot of the properties up here in Alaska, they move horribly. So every year or two, you'll want to re-level your house or cabin. That's why a lot of places are built small. And wouldn't you look at that, some walls snuck in on us and set up shop. So unfortunately, there were other pictures and videos that I have apparently lost, but we'll just make do with what we've got. So at this point, we've got some main walls up. And short of the door, I actually didn't frame in any other windows, mainly because I wasn't positive on how I wanted the interior layout to be. And I also didn't have the windows yet, so I didn't know what size they were going to be. Now, it was just about at this point on the build that I actually ran across a local ad. One of our local glass companies was actually changing the brand of windows they carry, and they were selling a bunch of their old stock and all their display windows for about $50 a piece. And these are triple pane windows, so basically brand new triple pane windows in the whole house. And I basically bought almost all of them and sold a couple, which paid for all of the ones I bought. That's really something to point out when you're doing something like this, is to have a general idea of what you're going to do, but be scrounging Craigslist and the Facebook ads and all that jazz. But for building materials, you know, you can get things pennies on the dollar, sometimes new or close to new. So as you can see, now we're framing in a window or two. Now you'll notice that header's kind of just one board deep. Usually it's at least a 4x over the window there. But what we're going to do up here is that there's going to be two 2x6s that are sandwiching a 2-inch chunk of foam, essentially. This is all in the name of trying to provide a thermal break, whereas a traditional header, it would allow cold to transfer from the outside to the inside. If you're building a place in cold country, it's really worth it to look into stuff like this. That being thermal breaks and tips and tricks as far as insulation goes. Everything you can do in a place that gets historically below -70 as far as insulation and thermal breaks in your wall system goes is really beneficial, both in energy wise as far as trying to heat your home and retaining that heat. There is a place here in Fairbanks called a Cold Climate Research Facility or something like that. Anyhow, you might go to their website and see what they have to offer. They also have a bunch of YouTube videos. So moving on, obviously you can see we've started to put our second floor in. Now this is 2x6 Toung and Grove pine flooring. And I absolutely love this stuff. It feels great. It looks great. And it's actually not too bad to work with either. Now, a person might want to just get their roof on before putting your flooring in like this, because it's kind of risking some weather damage on it, which luckily didn't happen. But again, doing this all by yourself, it's kind of nice to have a floor to stand on when you're putting your roof up. So the beams for our second floor are doubled up 2x10s, and they're actually lagged into from our top plate of the first floor up. And then the framing of our roof will lag into those beams. So now, speaking of the roof, here we are getting some house wrap on in prep for the roof, and we'll start cutting all of our pieces for a roof. Now, there's math that you can do with your frame and square and all that, but I cheated and I hopped on AutoCAD and drew it all out because it was easier. And here we are doing just that in the place I was living in while building the cabin. This is what I call the moose hut. There's a video on building and living in it. I'll put a little post to that right here. It's basically a 7 by 8 foot tiny house. Anyhow, so here we are back at it. After doing our math, we're cutting in our ridge and eave cuts and our bird's mouth. And then once I had them all cut, of course, transfer them up to the second floor and start standing them up. And here you see the very first set of our rafters put up. Now, these have a collar tie that's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood on either side, right there at the top. So I'm not using a ridge pole on this roof, and then we'll have, of course, battens that our tin will be screwed to. Now you'll notice the house wraps going up as I'm putting up our rafters because it decided to rain on us. Now, never minding the rain, as I stood up the rafters, as I traveled, I'd get the house wrap put up, trying to keep everything as dry as possible. Of course, I had plastic on the floors at the time to aid with that. Now, doing it this way, I wasn't able to get the roof battens on as I traveled. So what I did was had temporary battens essentially on the inside of the roof, and then once all the house wrap was on, I was able to come back and put battens on over the house wrap. Now, with all the rain, I'd about had it and decided it was time to take a trip into the back 40. A real nice little part of this property as it backs up to a bunch of state land. So, a little trip into the back, and there's plenty of rose hips and blueberries, raspberries, and such to be found. It was real refreshing to break away from building and, construction and hammering nails and all that jazz. Get out there into God's country and enjoy Alaska for really what we come here for. On that note, Buddy also decided to give me a call and say, hey, you want to take the jet boat up on the Yukon? I said, sure. Our timing wasn't quite right, but man, it was great to get out on the Dalton Highway and get down on the Yukon River for a bit. We kind of got skunked. Our timing wasn't right on the fishing, but we did manage to catch a few sheefish. Now I'd rather be catching fish, but sometimes a guy just feels pretty dang blessed to get out there on the water, or heck, get out in the woods, just get out and do stuff. So this is actually Yukon River Bridge. Now this little raft here on the river, pretty cool deal with them tents on there. That's Neil, a buddy of mine's friend, and he's actually a pretty cool dude. He's got a book wrote called Alaska Ivory Hunter. Really kind of a neat read if you're into Alaska stuff. On that note, another really great book that you should read is Shadows on the Koyukuk by Sydney something. Well, it's been a great little 2-day holiday, but that midnight sun is burning, so let's get back to work. That's actually a midnight sun at 2 in the morning. Now, the only reason I actually did break away from this project to go fishing was because I was waiting on tin. That's not entirely true. I would have gone fishing anyways. Anyhow, I was waiting on tin to be made. You can get tin formed and cut to the specific length that you want for your roof, if you didn't know, which is fantastic. So, obviously, here we go, putting it up on the roof. Easier said than done. Actually, it's not too bad to do if you're doing it by yourself. You just kind of hold it behind your back, climb up the ladder, and then you can climb up the battens all the way to the top. Now, when we're talking about battens, actually, I'd like to pause right here. You notice that when you look under the battens, that's the 2x4s that cross over the Lowe's house wrap. You'll notice some little white bits. What those are foam that keeps the house wrap pushed away from the roof's battens. That's what the tin is attaching to. That allows airflow from your eaves to your roof's ridge. The whole idea here is you want to keep the tin from getting warm and melting the snow underneath of it. Now, this roof's steep enough, it should shed snow pretty well. Even if it doesn't, you don't want the snow to melt, and then that water is going to drip down towards the edge of your roof, and then it's going to form what they call a ice dam, and that's not good. Speaking of not good, that's a feeling you get on top of that ladder there, putting the sheathing up there at the top of that wall. Speaking of things that are funny, I had this squirrel join me for lunch on this day, and probably got the best picture of the year out of it. I think it's kind of comical. So all squirrels aside, with most of the roof and tin on, it was time to get some windows in. Now, we missed out on all the pictures of cutting these windows in, unfortunately, but hey, that's alright. At this point, I was really feeling like I was starting to get somewhere, starting to get some things, plugged into this place. And oh, little spoiler alert on the side in here, eh? I had to have a buddy come over and help me get that window in. That sucker was heavy. That big, well, not bay window, but the big window. A big shout out to Josh for helping me with that one. If anyone needs a horse shod in Fairbanks area, he's your man. Now it may become obvious to you that we're putting siding on. I had decided on most of the structure to do a tin skirting, and then from there on up, about 4 foot up, would be exterior grade plywood that's stained a couple of times, and then we'll have rough cut strips on it, and it'll give it the board and batten look. The astute among us may have noticed that we're framing in our Arctic entry. Arctic entries are great because it gives you a break from letting cold air enter the house's warm air during the winter. I suppose you could also call it a porch or a mudroom, and it does serve as both those purposes as well. But that winter break from opening one door, entering the room, closing it, and then opening the door to the main house makes a huge difference in heat in the house. Now I had a whole mess of things going on, not just putting the siding up in a tin, but putting the siding up, doing the tin, getting all the trim put in, and at the same time working on the inside of the house. About this time on the inside of the house, I was drilling and installing all the wiring so that I could get insulation put in, vapor barrier, foam, then get our wall sheathing on the inside of the house put up. Now I did about 3 layers of stain on the exterior, and the way I did that is after the first 2, I did a third one that was intermittent, and I would favor one side or the other of a 12-inch center. So the reason for that is, as you can see here with the batten strips on there, it kind of looks like individual boards in between, and it loses the look of just regular old exterior grade plywood. Now these battens that give it that clapboard look, and as well as what you see there on the ends of the gables, the trim around the door, the trim around the windows, along the eaves, this is all local rough cut timber. It really gives a really great look, and I think it turned out fantastic. So as things progressed as far as finishing up the exterior of the cabin here, it was time to get the gable ridge and eave flashing on. Had to have a couple of pieces custom made in town, unfortunately, but getting it on was not the easiest thing. Once you've got all the tin on the roof, it's not easy to crawl around on a 12 and 13 roof. That's like 47 degrees. So 2 ladders and various ways of strapping them to different objects or the ground, and that was how we got the stuff up. I only had one near fall that was, well, let's just say that I had to change my shorts afterwards. So, with a desire to do something a little bit more down to earth and a fresh pair of shorts, it was time to bury our electrical line. A couple 100 feet of direct bury cable that scored off of the Craigslist. Really awesome. And this old little track hoe, we got that accomplished. Got a trench dug, got the line in, got it buried up, and got power from the power lines to the cabin. So, let's hop inside the cabin and start getting some insulation done. So as you can see, by this time I had been able to drill and run all the wiring, as well as get most of the insulation on the upstairs done. Josh come over and helped me get the vapor barrier up on this. That was a big help. Big old sheet of plastic there. The fewer cuts you can have in the vapor barrier, the better it is. That vapor barrier leads a major role of keeping hot air from escaping the house and cold air from coming in. So here we just go through some shots. The first floor, of course I got the stairs kind of put together there, and we're getting insulation in the walls. And once all that insulation's in, we can get our vapor barrier up and tape each and every one of the seams. In just a few short months, the midnight sun gives way to the northern lights, and it starts to remind us that winter's right around the corner, and really lights a fire under our butt to get this thing done before the first snow. And speaking of lighting a fire, the best way to keep the heat from a fire in is to put foam on the inside of the house. You can put it on the outside too. Now the idea here is that you want 2/3 of your insulating mass to be on the outside of the vapor barrier, And the reasons for this have to do with the dew point and condensation collecting on one or the other side of your vapor barrier. That's something y'all might want to research yourself if you're building a cabin and looking at getting the best out of thermal efficiency. The second thing about the foam, either on the outside or the inside, it creates a thermal break between your studs. Here in the window opening, you'll take note of that red tape. That's sealing the vapor barrier against the window box. In a similar manner, we seal the vapor barrier to the floor to eliminate any air transfer through the floor and the base plate of the stud wall. This wall is going to be stood up and make a little room, it can in the future be a bathroom, but we're not going to have a bathroom or plumbing in this building at the time at all. So we're going to have an outhouse. This is what you call a dry cabin up here in Alaska. Pretty common in interior Fairbanks, Alaska. Now, not everyone lives in them. There's plenty of plumbing in town, and even outside of town people have plumbing. But there's a higher expense of having plumbing, keeping things from freezing half the year round, and sometimes it's just simpler to use an outhouse. So naturally, the place that we go to do our nature will make somewhat more attractive and do it up like we did the siding on the main cabin. Back inside the cabin, once we're done with talking about nature, we're getting all the finalities kind of finished up, starting to get the walls put together, the wiring put together, slap some paint and stain all over the place. By now, the rest of the world had kind of slowed down, and I had some friends that were able to stop by and give me a hand putting some paint and stain on the interior, which was a huge help. And the fumes were sure to get everyone high, that's for a fact. But anyhow, I digress. As you can see, slapping in cabinets, getting the windows all trimmed out, that was kind of a nice little job to do. And I would have absolutely loved to build the cabinets, but I ended up purchasing them at the, Lowe's. I think I had like a 20% off coupon, so I bought a bunch of stuff all at one time and got a smoking deal on it all. So as this kind of cabin project starts to kind of play out and get finished up, it was all the little things that had to be done. All these light fixtures and painting and getting the floors stained and sealed and all that jazz. And, it's funny. Once you get down to this stuff seems to take the longest time. All the little things, you got to get all your switches in and your sockets in. Every little bit of trim and molding, all your switch plates. And then, of course, your flooring and such. That flooring was actually pretty sweet. What was it called? Pergo. I got it for a quarter of the price. I don't know why, but Home Depot had a pallet of it that they were selling for like $1 a square foot, and the stuff cost like $5 a square foot. So that was really a sweet score. Now, reflecting back on building this place, it sure was a lot of fun, and I'll just fair warn you, I'm not a professional carpenter, heck, I'm not really a professional anything. Of course, people have been fooled into paying me $1 or $2 to do this kind of work from time to time. And if you're thinking about going out and building a cabin or something, or a shanty or a shack or a mansion, hey, all the power to you. That's kind of half my reasoning for throwing this video together. Help encourage you to get out there and build something. Maybe you're looking for ideas, whether it's building a cabin up here in Alaska, or, I don't know, down in Tennessee. This is give you some different ideas. Maybe more in particular some cold country stuff and, obviously smaller square footage dwelling. But, it's limitless out there. The world's your oyster, as they say. There's so many things I could have done different that would, looking back on it now, that I would have liked to tweak that, do something a little bit different there. But you never really know until you do it. So just, get out there and do it. Now, all this being said, some resources for information. Again, that cold climate research facility in Fairbanks, Alaska, that's a good one to turn to for some of this cold weather stuff. They do a lot of stuff regarding testing different building materials in subarctic conditions. And then also your local and state building codes. The American Wood Council is another great resource for information and different data, as well as Southern Pine Products Association and similar associations and entities such as these. You can get different information from them, from span tables to wood framing standards and codes. All kinds of different information. Of course, we got all kinds of different outlets for getting information on building something and getting different ideas from these different online resources that I mentioned to, well, I guess the Pinterest and the tweet Facebook or whatever all the social media stuff is these days. Personally, I grew up watching Bob Vila, This Old House Classics, and the New Yankee Workshop. That's where I learned a lot of, like, getting into all this. Of course, things are different these days. We got YouTube and such. And speaking of YouTube, thanks for watching the video. I hope it helped you somehow, and maybe you just enjoyed the little journey. Anyhow, take care, get out there and build stuff, and enjoy life. We'll catch you next time. Alright, it is, what time is it? Yeah, it's 12:19. And focus. I am, where the heck am I? There's the truck. I am, I'm somewhere between Tok and Delta. No, I'm past that. Past Delta. Delta's down there. Fairbanks is down there. Somewhere. And it's a beautiful day or night. And I am making a little shot of coffee. Because you've seen how easily I could remember where the hell I was at. Anywho, the old Toyota's running pretty good. Oh,